Welcome to the I Am the Worst Parent Ever podcast with Nicole Merritt and Dr. Robert Zeitlin.
Hey, Robert, how are you?
I'm good, Nicole. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I have a question for you.
Okay, shoot.
When your kids were younger, or even now as they're older, did you ever notice a discrepancy between kind of like the personality they'll show you at home and then the one they're putting out into the world in the public?
Oh yeah, I think we all do that, but I'm trying to think of an example of when, I hear that from parents a lot, actually. A lot of parents come to me and they're like, the school says my kid is this or that, and I don't believe it. I never see it at home. Does that happen with you?
Yeah, so I actually, early in the blog, I wrote an article about it. But yes, I won't name names, but one of my children, I hear from the teachers, they're such a terrific student, such a great listener, so helpful, and I swear they get in the car and some switch gets flipped and it's just like crazy mode, and I'm not going to listen, and I'm going to be a bit defiant, and it baffles me sometimes.
Wow. Do you feel like maybe they use it up at school? Like they spend all that?
Well, you know what? Yes. I mean, I've talked to my mom about it often, and I've said to her, we've talked about how, yes, that it takes a lot to kind of keep yourself together and on. And that for, 4 or 5 hours when they're going these half days, that's a long time to be behaving, and then you're their safe person, you're their safe place. And so, yes, it just kind of all just pours out of them involuntarily when they get back to you.
So really it's a testament to your parenting that you give them enough space to be who they need to be.
Right. I mean, I've read enough articles. There's been so many out there on this is why they're the worst, with their mother.
Right.
So there's definitely, some opinions and maybe even some findings on it, but it's still a struggle to be in it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, you don't need to be the receiver of all that stuff, but I also wonder like what it is about the school environment that it's either like a new adult that our kids are trying to please or want to make sure they don't get in trouble in front of their friends, or I don't know, some kind of group dynamic where like kids will behave more in front of each other.
Right. Have you given suggestions to a mom or a dad that's come in and said, this is what we're dealing with, what do I do?
Usually when they're dealing with usually they're coming to me and they're like, I don't know what the school's talking about. He's fine at home. So the suggestions usually have to do with communicating with the school. But if it was the flip side, the suggestions would be, I don't know. I feel like, what you really want to happen in that case may not be what you want to happen. Like, for instance, do you want things to be more level? Do you want them to act up more at school and less at home?
Right.
Or do you want like a perfect kid all the time? Because if it's a perfect kid all the time, you guys have come to the right podcast, because we're going to tell you that's not going to happen.
Right. And I guess that's where I struggle, because I'm very happy and proud that my child will have discipline at school, self-discipline, and contain their behavior and listen to the rules and follow the rules. But it's frustrating because I'm just like, why can't you do that for mommy? And I tried to implement, okay, is it the structure? Because here, like, let's implement some of the same structure. Okay, right. What do they use as a consequence? Okay, you don't get to go on the playground. Okay, well then at home you don't get to play with this toy or whatever it is. So I try to match it up. But most of the time, I still don't see much of a change. I do think with my child, it's an age thing. I think if I recall correctly, like with my daughter, that kind of jumped from 4 to 5 and 5 to 6. There's all this cognitive stuff happening. And I think that things will get better. I just have to kind of stay connected with him and not get so frustrated.
Right, right. And I think it's, you know, when I think about teachers who ask me these questions, because I work in schools too, like, I think there's a lot of research out there that shows that you elicit the behavior in students. Well, managing a classroom is different than managing a family, first of all. But I think there's a lot more going on. The kids are receiving messages from us as the leaders of the classroom or the family or the van at the moment. And I don't think we're always aware of that. So I think one thing that I suggest to teachers, and I would suggest to parents in the same situation, is like you're trying to add structure and be like the teacher or be like the school environment. Obviously you can't make that happen, but you can bring an attitude that works for him in a different way. And that's a challenge for a teacher, because they have 20 or so kids or more sometimes to like give the attitude each of those kids needs. But it's a special challenge, and we've talked about it as a parent. You know, you have 3 kids at 3 different levels. You're trying to meet their needs, and you're trying to meet them where they are. But what is it about what he needs?
Right. Right. And I mean, I think that like you just said, I'm trying to mimic the teacher, but like I still have my phone in my hand. Like I'm sure his teacher doesn't, you know? And I think you and I had talked about this recently. Somebody shared a quote recently that was basically like everything your child is doing is based off like some need that you're not meeting. And I've read, it's a response to, am I not present? Does he not have eyes on him, attention? Is he trying to talk to me and I'm half listening? And he knows that, like you have said so many times before, kids can see behind the curtain. Right. That I've tried in the past week, like especially to be more conscious, to put my phone down and to be fully engaged and to not half listen to the story that's taking 45 minutes to tell me why, you know, the popsicle's purple. I've really tried, and I have noticed better responses when I take the time to do that. As always, like you said, with me having 3 at different ages and other people probably being in the same boat, that's where I struggle, because if the little one's having a tantrum at the same time I'm supposed to be present for him, it's like I literally, like you can just picture my head just blowing up. Like it's tough.
Yeah, no, we were just having a conversation about how it's hard to switch between 2 things and do 2 things at once. You actually can't do 2 things at once. We talk about multitasking all the time, but there's a lot of research that shows that's a myth. You think you're multitasking, but you're really just like doing a little this and a little that. Right. It's like if you're cooking 2 things on the stove, but you only actually have 1 heat source, you're really just switching the pots back and forth. Right. But getting back to your point about, first of all, that sounded really harsh what you read about like whatever your kids are doing is some need that you're not meeting as a parent. That seems like old school blame the mom kind of like philosophy. First of all, did it ring true for you? I mean, some of it has worked.
I mean, I don't think that I am misquoting it a bit. Like I don't remember the exact words, but I guess that's what resonated.
Did it say Nicole in there? Nicole, you're doing it wrong?
Right. But no, I mean, for me, it did kind of click, because I wrote a piece a while ago about my youngest, my littlest, like how her tantrums are my fault. No, not all of them, but I can clearly, like, you know, see where I was kind of neglecting something, or I didn't give the attention something it needed, or I didn't validate a feeling or an emotion. So more often than not, I do play a role. I might not be like, you know, the main cause, but I'm definitely contributing to what's happening in the situation.
Yeah, and I think that's an important realization. And hopefully parents get that. When parents get that, they don't take it too far and just like decide that they're the cause of every problem that's ever happened. But parents or teachers or dads who, I said parents because I thought I was saying moms, but parents or teachers or anyone who works with kids who don't get that their behavior, the adult behavior is a determining factor. It's not the thing that's causing, but it's a determining factor in what you're getting out of the kids. If you don't get that, you need to get that. But don't also overplay it, because kids are also who they are. So coming back to your question with your child, like if you want to correct this behavior, what if this is the behavior that he needs to spin off? What if it's artificial for him to like behave and like sit with his hands folded and be all angelic in school? And it's just like, this needs to balance things. Like, even if you did everything perfectly, this is exactly who he is.
Right. Well, and when I think about it, I need to balance things. Like, I'm not a different person. I'm myself, but I'm more open on my blog when I write. Maybe I'll write a little bit snarkier than I would be if I was speaking directly to somebody. Inside of my own home, I yell. I'm working on not yelling, but I yell. But you'll never see me yell at Publix or in school pickup line. So he is, and all of my children are seeing me kind of turn on a switch off and on. I mean, I would venture to guess that most of us do that. Even I don't think we do it with the intention of being fake or deceiving people. It's just we have these different facets of our personality that show themselves at different points in the day.
No, I agree. I mean, you started off the whole conversation with the question of, is your kid different in this format or that format? But if we're being honest, are we different in this format or that format? Of course we are. We're different when we're alone. We're different when we're with our partner. We're different with our best friend. We're different after the kids go to bed.
Right.
You're different when we write on our blog.
Yeah, I guess I need to stop, almost not shaming, but maybe it's shaming, like shaming my child for having great behavior here and not at home, and just try to figure out the cause, the difference, why it's coming out, and how we can, if it's that when you're home, you're antsy or you're overstimulated or whatever it is, like just trying to like narrow that down and figure out what it is so I can make like active changes.
Yeah, and I have to bring in here also his understanding of the behavior. So like you said, good behavior and bad behavior, and we slip into this sort of rating behavior. And basically what we're telling our kids is, police yourselves, because I'm not going to be happy if you do this, and I'm going to be happy if you do this. I'm going to yell if you do this. I'm not going to say anything, or I'm going to reward you, etc. But we also have to consider, what does the behavior mean to the kid? If they're sort of setting up a bad relationship with their teacher because of X or Y behavior, how does that make them feel? Do they feel like, I'm not loved, in school, or at home I'm like the problem? How many times the last week has this kid been the problem?
Right.
Like, and so what does that mean to them? How does it play in their mind, and what do they start to do with that? Do they start to act differently? Do they start to chip away at their self-esteem? It could be a lot of things.
Sure. I mean, and I have, 3, and so I have a 7-year-old girl, a 2-year-old girl, and a 4-year-old boy. And I think, you've got one that just demands attention with her presence. You've got another that is just getting the attention because of her age, So here's my other child who needs and wants and deserves attention. So he's going to find a way to get it, whereas in school, most teachers are good, at dividing their attention and making every child feel like they have a space. So I'm not bashing myself, but it's good for us parents to recognize where we can improve. And for me, I know that's one area.
Right. And I also know for those listening that buy into the birth order idea, that it's really important if you're firstborn, if you're a middle child, et cetera. By the way, there's no research that confirms any of this, but everyone believes it, and it just seems logical. Like, it's in our families, this is why that kid is like that, because they're the middle child. But for those that believe it, there's at least some validity to the fact that if a teacher is a middle child or struggled with similar things, can they connect with or understand what's going on?
Right. I have that. So Robert, where are you in your siblings? I'm
the oldest.
You're the oldest. See, I'm the youngest. And
Oh.
I wrote on how the youngest are, the wonder kids of the family. But I think you and my sister, who is the oldest, would would tell me I'm wrong about that.
We will.
Yes. No. I mean,
because we like telling you what's right and what's wrong.
right. Right. No. I mean, I definitely recognize and struggle with it inside of the home, making sure that each of my children get the attention that they want and that they need. But for families that have more than one child, or maybe it's just you balancing one child and your job and your marriage, it gets tough to make sure that everything gets the time and attention and love and tending to that it deserves.
Right. And we've talked about that struggle too. That struggle is real for the parents that are diving into it and taking on that challenge. It's a lot of work.
Right. Can I ask you, so the kids that misbehave more at school and less at home, is it that they're not feeling they're getting the attention in school, or that maybe there's a social piece missing that kind of throws them off? Like, is there a common theme or anything that you've noticed?
Yeah, I guess it would be three things. The two things you mentioned, one is that it's harder to get attention when you're competing with 20 kids than it is when you're competing with 2 or 3 kids at home.
Right.
And so those parents that are coming to me kind of confused, are self-select, think about the parent that's coming to a psychologist versus the parent that's not going to come to a psychologist. Like, they're on, they're concerned and taking action on the behalf of their kid. Not that kids who don't go to psychologists aren't, but it's a specific kind of parent. So it kind of makes sense that the kids getting attention, but also, or attention at home, but also I think there's a social piece and competing with other kids. So there could be a sibling piece. So, I mean, it's hard to run a family too and make sure that every kid is getting their needs met, because it's hard. Every kid is their own sort of advocate. But then there's also just the teacher piece too, and the school piece, with respect to teachers, even the best teachers who can really manage a crowd and manage classroom behavior and do all this are still sometimes overwhelmed. Like, you talk about a mom having to do with all the things. Teachers more and more are having all these responsibilities thrown on them, and all this like mandate, you have to get the kids from here to here in this amount of time. And like, that's not always how kids work. So they're having to like move kids like against their natural sort of progression. So I think there's a lot of factors that can go into it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think that I guess, I don't know, before I became a parent, I just never realized how much of my behavior and my actions like affected them, and not, and just kind of, I don't know, made their way into them. I guess my suggestion, my thinking for myself, my suggestion for anybody else that's dealing with it, is just for us to almost like write out a sheet of, okay, have I been connecting at home? Okay, check, we've done that. Is he feeling like his, level of where he is in his intelligence, like, is that being met at school? Maybe he's bored, or maybe he's struggling, try to figure that out. Okay, what about the social piece? Is he feeling comfortable? Does he have friends? And kind of going through the checklist and knocking things off, and making sure you're kind of looking at it from a whole piece of, okay, as a whole person, like what's missing here.
And you don't need to do that in a vacuum. It depends on how old your kids are and what kind of feedback you're looking for. We talked about this before. It's hard for a parent or a teacher to ask for feedback. First of all, it's a very vulnerable thing to do in general, and any job or anything that you do in your life. But also, you're very invested, when you're working with kids, to make sure that you're doing it right and you're not messing them up. So getting some sort of feedback or understanding from his point of view, like what's going on, is challenging, but can be really valuable. And then the other thing is, especially if kids are younger and it's kind of hard to get that, is getting other adults' perspective. So a teacher who's struggling with her class, for instance, like to get other teachers' perspective on, like, oh yeah, every time I walk by, that one's messing with that one, and that's a group dynamic you see that's in the back that you don't even see it's happening. Right. Like having more eyeballs on it. So it's obviously easier in a lot of ways to raise kids with a partner, but also other people involved in your kids' lives could maybe give you some perspective and help you piece together a picture of what it might look like through his eyes.
Yeah. Yep. No, I agree with you. And then sometimes, honestly, and I wrote about it once too, I called it our children are just phasing us. Like they will have these phases. Like I remember, I forget exactly which, it's probably a good thing. I forget which child and what the phase was, but I do remember like being so bothered by, and I'm like, oh no, like what's wrong? What am I messing up? Like, is this going to go on? Are they going to be like this forever? You know? And then just one day it was like, boom, like it stopped being an issue. And I was like, I was phased. Like, what just happened? Like, I didn't change any. And so sometimes I think you just have to accept that it's a phase. And as they say, this too shall pass.
This too shall pass. And sometimes it gets worse right before it gets better. And, you know, there's a pediatrician who wrote some books on I think he called it touch points. But basically he said, look for those bright moments right before the sun sets, you know, because that's telling you that something's about to happen. So yeah, get some perspective, ask for some feedback, ask for just another person's opinion, step back from it as much as you can, because they'll make you crazy otherwise.
Yes, totally agree with you. Well, this was a great talk, Robert.
Okay, talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the I Am the Worst Parent Ever podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss an episode.